Before we jump into today's deep dive, a quick shout out to CertFuel, who actually brought us this material. If you're studying for the Securities Industry Essentials exam, the SIE, you really need to check them out at certfuel.com.
Yeah, they're great.
They've got this full SIE course with adaptive study quizzes, smart flashcards, and like unlimited practice exams that are weighted exactly like the real thing. It's basically the ultimate cheat code for your brain. So yeah, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Welcome, everyone. If you are listening to this, you're gearing up for the SIE. And today we are taking a massive deep dive into a very specific, like incredibly crucial slice of your exam, which is registration and continuing education.
Right. And we really need to establish the stakes right out of the gate here, because this specific area, it accounts for about 9% of your entire SIE exam.
9%.
Yeah, 9%. So in practical terms, that translates to roughly 7 questions. And, you know, in the world of standardized testing, 7 questions can absolutely be the barrier between passing and failing. It's a super high yield topic.
Definitely. And look, we know how studying for this goes, right?
Right.
We know that if we just sit here and read you a dry, monotonous list of like FINRA regulations and timelines, your brain is just going to shut off.
Oh, totally.
We'll be mentally redecorating your living room in about 3 minutes. So we aren't doing that. We're throwing the textbook out the window, and we're going to focus entirely on the why.
Which is really the secret to retaining this information. Because when you just try to memorize a rule, say a 30-day deadline or something, your brain just treats it as arbitrary data.
Right. It just slips away.
Exactly. But when you understand why a regulatory body actually implemented that specific timeline, you don't have to rely on rote memorization. You can sit in that exam room and literally logic your way through a tricky scenario.
I love that. So to make this sticky, we're going to follow a cast of characters today. We have 3 fictional people working at a hypothetical broker-dealer.
Yeah.
First, we have diligent Diane. Diane is, well, she's our rule follower. She highlights everything in her textbook, genuinely wants to do the right thing, but because there are so many overlapping rules, she occasionally gets tripped up by the details.
And then we have reckless Ricky.
Oh, Ricky?
Yeah, Ricky is the guy who thinks the rules are just, suggestions. He's always looking for a shortcut, a loophole, or just a way to bypass compliance because he thinks he's some sort of market genius.
He is a walking SEC violation, basically.
Exactly. Plus, he's trying to hide a few sketchy details from his past. He represents every compliance nightmare a firm could possibly have.
And finally, we have Boss Bob. Bob is their supervisor. He is perpetually stressed out, runs on like 6 cups of coffee a day, and his own personal livelihood is constantly on the line because of what Diane and Ricky are doing out on the floor.
Or Bob.
Right. So before anyone can even start trading, they have to get past the bouncers at the door. Let's talk about the gateway to the industry, the 2-part exam system.
This is the foundation. So before 2018, the pathway into the industry was quite different. You couldn't just decide you wanted to take a licensing exam. You actually had to be hired and sponsored by a brokerage firm first.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then they would let you take your exams. But the regulators realized this was creating a huge bottleneck. It was keeping good talent out of the industry.
So they split it into 2 parts. Step 1 is the SIE exam, the one you, the listener, are studying for right now. And step 2 is a top-off qualification exam.
Precisely. And what's fascinating here is the philosophical difference between the two. The SIE is designed to test general industry knowledge. It covers the broad strokes.
Like what a stock is, basic rules, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And because it's so general, FINRA decided that anyone 18 or older can take it. You don't need a firm to vouch for you. You don't need to be employed in finance.
You could just be a college student or a teacher looking for a career change.
Right. You just pay the fee, sign up, and take it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Diligent Diane is in college. She wants to be a broker. She signs up for the SIE, studies hard, and passes on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, can she start selling mutual funds to her neighbors? I mean, she passed a FINRA exam. I will give you a beat to think about it.
She definitely cannot.
Oh, yeah.
The SIE alone does not grant you registration status. It doesn't allow you to sell a single share of anything. It's merely the prerequisite. To actually do the job, you have to pass a top-off exam.
Gotcha. Like the Series 7 or the Series 6?
Yeah, or the Series 79 for investment banking.
Yeah.
These top-off exams test your knowledge of the specific weapons you'll be handling, options, municipal bonds, things like that.
I like to think of this using a medical analogy.
Yeah.
Let's say you want to be a surgeon. The SIE is like taking your written medical boards. You can buy the books, study in your bedroom, and pass the test to prove you have the book smarts. But you can't just set up a folding table in your backyard and start performing appendectomies. To actually practice medicine, you need a hospital to sponsor your residency. You need an institution to back you.
That is exactly how the securities industry works. You must be sponsored by a member firm to take a top-off exam.
So if Reckless Ricky passes his SIE, he still needs a firm to sponsor him before he can actually do anything.
Exactly. And this brings us to one of the most common traps you will see on the exam. Test makers love to see if you understand this boundary.
Oh, this is a big one, guys. Listen up.
They will give you a scenario where someone passes the SIE and immediately tries to engage in the securities business. You must explicitly remember the SIU requires no sponsorship, but it grants no registration.
Right.
Top-offs require firm sponsorship, and that is what leads to full registration.
Write that down. SIE equals no sponsor. Top-off equals sponsor. Okay, so Diane does it right. Bob hires her, sponsors her for the Series 7, and she passes. Now she's ready, right?
Well, not quite yet.
Right, because passing the test just proves you know the rules. Now, FINRA wants to know who you are, and that brings us to the dreaded paperwork, the Form U4.
Form U4. It is one of the most important documents in the entire financial ecosystem.
I always explain the U4 as like the most invasive financial dating profile ever created. It's a massive digital footprint.
It really is, and it gets filed electronically into a massive database called the CRD, the Central Registration Depository.
Which is basically FINRA's central nervous system, right?
Exactly. It tracks the registration status, employment history, and disciplinary records of every single registered person in the country.
Okay, but procedural question here. Does Diane log into the CRD and file this U4 herself?
No, and this is a key detail. The individual representative does not file the U4. The member firm, so Boss Bob in this case, files it on her behalf.
So Bob is claiming her. He's saying, we vouch for this person.
Right. And for the exam, there are two major timeframes regarding personal history that you must lock into your memory. The U4 requires a 10-year employment history and a 5-year residential history.
10 years of jobs, 5 years of addresses.
Exactly. And they want a seamless, gapeless record. If Diane spent 6 months backpacking through Europe, she has to list unemployed backpacking for those 6 months.
Oh, really?
Yes. Any gap longer than a few months will cause the system to flag the application.
That is intense. And she has to disclose criminal history too, obviously.
Criminal history, regulatory actions, civil judgments, customer complaints, and very importantly, financial compromises.
Wait, like credit card debt?
Like if she negotiated a settlement with a creditor or filed for bankruptcy.
Why does FINRA care about her personal credit card debt?
Well, think about it. If you can't manage your own money, you probably shouldn't be managing millions of dollars for retirees.
Oh, right. Or if you're buried in debt, the temptation to dip into a client's account is much higher.
Spot on. It's all about assessing risk.
Now, here is where it gets really tricky, listener. This is an exam trap. We know the U4 requires Diane to list 10 years of employment and 5 years of residential history. But Bob has to actually verify this stuff, right?
Yes. FINRA requires the firm to conduct a background check.
But does Bob have to verify all 10 years of her jobs?
He does not. And this discrepancy is heavily tested. The firm's mandatory background check only requires investigating the last 3 years of employment and the last 3 years of residence.
Hold on. Let me play devil's advocate. If the form requires 10 years, why on earth would FINRA only force the firm to verify 3 years? Isn't that a massive loophole?
It sounds contradictory, but it's based on administrative reality. FINRA wants a decade of your life on file for long-term historical context. But think about Boss Bob.
Right, he's already stressed.
Exactly. If he had to verify every single job for the last 10 years, he'd be spending weeks tracking down the manager of some defunct frozen yogurt shop Diane worked at when she was 19.
Oh yeah, that would take forever.
It would grind hiring to a halt. So the 3-year background check is a practical, immediate vetting tool.
That makes total sense. So let's do a side-by-side comparison. If a question asks, what are the disclosure requirements on Form U4? The answer is 10 years of employment, 5 years of residency.
Correct.
But if it asks, what must the firm verify during their background check? The answer is 3 years of employment, 3 years of residency.
3 and 3 for the firm, 10 and 5 for the form.
Love that. Now, is the U4 just a one-and-done thing? Like, let's say Diane moves to a new apartment across town. Can she just tell HR to update her paycheck address? I'll give you a second to think.
She can't just do that.
Form U4 has a continuing obligation, right?
Yes. Any reportable change must be updated on the U4 within 30 days.
30 days.
And that covers a lot. change of address, name change from marriage, civil lawsuits, or starting an outside business activity, an OBA.
Okay, Ricky is definitely going to mess this up. What if Ricky starts a side hustle selling custom sneakers online? He's not selling stocks, just shoes. Does he really have to put that on his U4?
He absolutely does. He must provide prior written notice to his firm, and the firm updates his U4 within 30 days.
Because it could be a conflict of interest.
Exactly. What if he sells shoes to his brokerage clients? What if he uses firm resources? The 30-day clock is relentless.
Okay, time for a pattern interrupt. Let's talk about something physical. Fingerprints. Obviously, you have to get fingerprinted to handle millions of dollars. But here is a surprising fact. FINRA doesn't even hold your fingerprints.
Yeah, that catches a lot of people off guard. It's actually an SEC rule, not a FINRA rule. Specifically, SEC Rule 17F2.
Wait, what's the difference?
Well, the SEC is a federal government agency. FINRA is a self-regulatory organization, an SRO. Because fingerprints involve criminal databases, FINRA doesn't process them.
So when Bob scans Diane's fingerprints, where do they go?
Straight to the FBI. The FBI runs the criminal background check and reports back to the firm and FINRA.
Okay, but what if there's a glitch? What if the fingerprints get lost in the mail? If the FBI doesn't receive them within 30 days of the U4 being filed, what happens to Diane's registration?
It is immediately flagged as inactive.
Boom. The 30-day rule strikes again.
And inactive is a hard stop. She must cease performing any duties that require registration. She is sidelined.
All right, let's take a breath. Diane passed her SIE, her Series 7, her U4 is perfect, fingerprints cleared. She is federally registered. Can she call a wealthy investor in California right now and pitch a stock?
No, she cannot.
And this brings us to blue sky laws. I always love that term. Where does it come from?
It dates back to 1911 in Kansas. There were a lot of con artists selling fraudulent investments to farmers. The banking commissioner pushed for a law to protect investors from promoters selling speculative schemes with, quote, no more basis than so many feet of blue sky.
Wow, selling nothing but air.
Exactly. So blue sky laws is just the nickname for state-level securities regulations. Every single state has its own specific set of rules and fees.
So FINRA is like your driver's license, proving you know how to drive federally. But state registration is like registering your car's license plate in every state you want to drive in?
That's a perfect analogy. Diane usually has to pass another exam, like the Series 63, for state regulations.
Now, listener, lean in for this part. There is a massive exam trap here about federal versus state laws.
States have the absolute right to impose stricter rules than FINRA or the SEC. They can demand higher requirements or more disclosures, but a state can never impose lesser standards than the federal government.
So if Texas wants to be super business friendly and says, hey, we only require a 1-year background check instead of 3, can they do that?
Absolutely not. Federal law is the floor. The state can build a taller ceiling, but they can't dig a basement.
If you see an exam answer where a state regulator relaxed a FINRA rule, cross it out immediately. It's a trap. Stricter is allowed, weaker is never allowed.
Exactly. And she must be registered in every single state where she conducts business. If a New York client moves to Florida, she can't execute trades for them until she registers in Florida.
Period. Okay, so Diane is fully registered, federal and state. Yeah. But reckless Ricky hasn't passed anything. He's just doing administrative work. This brings us to the red velvet rope, the line between registered and non-registered personnel.
It's a very rigid division, and it fundamentally comes down to decision-making, persuasion, and advice.
So if an activity involves persuading a customer or analyzing their situation, you must be registered.
Right, but if it's purely mechanical, like clerical work or passing message, you don't.
Let's put Ricky to the test. Scenario 1. Ricky is at the water cooler. A client asks, hey, what do you think about that new tech stock? Ricky says, oh, it's going to the moon. Best product ever. Did Ricky violate a rule? Think about it.
Oh, he absolutely did.
Yes. Discussing the merits of a specific security is selling. The exam will try to dress this up as a casual conversation. Do not fall for it.
Ricky should have said, I'm not licensed to discuss that. Let me get Diane.
Exactly. Scenario 2. A client calls and says, buy me 100 shares of Apple at the market price. Ricky knows he can accept an unsolicited order, so he writes it on a sticky note. But then his lunch arrives. He eats his meatball sub, chats with the delivery guy, and an hour later hands the note to Diane. Is Ricky safe here?
No, he is in massive trouble.
He held it for an hour.
A non-registered person can accept an unsolicited order, but they must forward it immediately. A delay means he handled the order. What if Apple's price dropped during that hour?
You just cost the client real money.
Exactly. Immediately is the magic word.
Rapid fire on gray areas. Can Ricky hand out marketing materials?
Yes, but only if they are pre-approved by a principal.
What if he prints out a Reddit post about a stock to give to a client?
Major violation. Unapproved sales literature.
Can he tell a client what Apple is currently trading at?
Yes, providing a factual quote is purely mechanical, but he can't give an opinion on it.
Got it. Okay, let's fast forward. Diane has been a superstar broker for 5 years. She hasn't looked at a textbook since she passed. But the markets change. New products exist. If she doesn't keep learning, she's a liability.
Which brings us to continuing education, or CE. You don't just get your license and coast. There are two parts: the regulatory element and the firm element.
Side-by-side comparison time. The regulatory element is like a standardized annual checkup from FINRA, right?
Yes, it covers broad regulatory developments and ethics. The firm element, on the other hand, is an employer-designed training camp specific to what your exact firm does.
So if Bob's firm only does options trading, their firm element focuses on options, not mutual funds.
Exactly. And here is where the exam tries to get you big time. This is a critical rule change from 2023.
Oh, pay attention to this, you guys.
Historically, the regulatory element was on a weird 3-year cycle. But as of 2023, it is annual. Both elements must be completed every single year.
Annual checkup, annual training camp. Simple. Now, can Bob just order pizzas and put on a YouTube video for the firm element?
Emphatically, no. FINRA requires a written needs analysis every year.
It has to be in writing.
Yes, if it isn't in writing, it didn't happen. Bob must document the firm's specific training needs and build a program around it. Just holding a meeting is a violation.
Okay, what if Diane gets super busy in December and completely forgets to do her regulatory CE? December 31st comes and goes. What happens on January 1st? Can you just pay a late fee and do administrative work?
No, absolutely not. The moment she misses that deadline, her status changes to CE inactive.
Which means?
She cannot perform any activities that require registration. She can't solicit clients, provide advice, or execute trades. She literally cannot even be in the room when a trade is being discussed.
She is basically reduced to Ricky's level.
Worse, actually, she cannot receive any compensation or trailing commissions for registered activities while she is inactive. Bob has to cut off her terminal access immediately.
Wow. Do your CE, people. Now, CE inactive is temporary, but Ricky is about to show us how to get permanently banned. Let's talk about statutory disqualification and ineligibility.
This is a heavy topic, but highly tested. Statutory disqualification, or SD, is a legal condition that makes you completely ineligible to associate with a member firm in any capacity. It's a blacklist.
And it's federal law, not just a FINRA policy. What are the triggers?
Being expelled by another regulator is one, but the most tested triggers are criminal convictions. Any felony conviction in the last 10 years or any securities-related misdemeanor in the last 10 years?
Okay, let's test this with scenarios. Scenario A, Ricky gets drunk, gets in a bar fight, and is convicted of a misdemeanor for simple assault. Disqualified.
No, it's a misdemeanor and it's not financial. He might get fired, but it doesn't trigger SD automatically.
Scenario B, Ricky hotwires a sports car and goes for a joyride. He's convicted of grand theft auto, a felony. It has nothing to do with finance. Disqualified.
Yes, all felonies trigger it, not just financial ones.
Wait, really? Why does a stolen car matter if you never stole client money?
It comes down to character and public trust. If you're willing to commit a major felony, regulators consider you an unacceptable risk to vulnerable investors.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the 10-year clock. Let's say Ricky stole the car in 2014, but the trial dragged on and he wasn't convicted until 2018. Does the clock start in 2014 or 2018?
Strictly on the date of conviction, so 2018.
What if he just pleads no contest because he's tired of the trial?
A no contest plea to a felony is treated exactly the same as a guilty plea. It triggers SD.
So he is toast. Now, what about ineligibility? That's a bit different than statutory disqualification, right?
Yes. SD requires a finished event, a conviction, but ineligibility can happen before a trial is even finished.
So if Ricky is formally indicted for wire fraud but hasn't gone to trial yet, can Bob keep him on the trading floor? I mean, innocent until proven guilty, right?
Nope. A pending indictment for a securities-related offense makes a person ineligible immediately. The firm must terminate his association right then and there. The risk to the public is just too high to wait for a verdict.
Fascinating. Is there any life raft for SD? Like, can Ricky ever work again?
There is a highly strict process called the Form MC400. Bob would have to formally beg FINRA to let Ricky work under hyper-strict, heightened supervision.
Like Bob sitting right next to him monitoring every email.
Exactly. And it's expensive, and FINRA can just say no anyway.
Which brings us to our final topic.
Yeah.
Why does Bob care so much? Because in this industry, liability flows downhill, the top-down terror.
Yes. Regulators don't just punish the bad actor. They punish the supervisors who are supposed to be watching. FINRA Rule 3110 requires firms to establish, maintain, and enforce a supervisory system.
If Ricky, unregistered, sneaks onto Diane's terminal and executes trades, obviously Ricky is in trouble. But the firm?
The firm faces massive fines, and FINRA can even suspend or revoke the entire firm's membership. Plus, Boss Bob faces personal sanctions.
Like paying a fine out of his own pocket.
Yes, or having his own license suspended.
Now, what if Bob genuinely didn't know Ricky was doing it? He was just negligent, not willful. Does Bob still get sanctioned personally?
He sure does. Ignorance is not a defense. It is your job to know. Supervisors face personal sanctions, even if they were merely negligent. The obligation flows from the top down.
No wonder Bob drinks so much coffee. All right, deep breath. We just covered a massive amount of ground. Let's lock it in with a rapid-fire recap.
I'm ready.
Takeaway 1. The SIE needs no sponsor, but it grants no registration. Top-offs do require a sponsor.
Takeaway 2. Form U4 requires 10 years of employment history updated within 30 days of changes, but the firm's background check is only 3 years.
Takeaway 3. Non-registered folks can only accept and forward orders if done immediately. No delays.
Takeaway 4. Regulatory CE is now an annual requirement. Miss it by December 31st, and you are CE inactive. 0 registered duties.
Takeaway 5. Any felony or securities-related misdemeanor in the last 10 years equals statutory disqualification, and that clock starts on the conviction date.
Takeaway 6. A pending indictment makes you ineligible immediately, even without a conviction.
Boom. High-yield exam gold.
And before we wrap, I want to leave you with a final thought. We talk a lot about rules and timelines, but think about the sheer weight of these rules. The entire financial system rests on trust.
Right.
When you take your SIE, don't just memorize the 10-year rule. Ask yourself, how does this protect a vulnerable investor from reckless Ricky? If you view every question through the lens of protecting public trust, the right answer usually reveals itself.
That's perfectly said. The rules are the walls protecting the castle. To you, the listener, keep grinding. Keep that ADHD superpower focused. And remind yourself to take a practice exam over at certfuel.com to test what you just learned. You got this. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
See you next time.